Good morning, and I am back once again with the Journal of Emily Shore. Today we are on page 224 of the 1891 edition. We are in the year 1838, and we are beginning with the entry for April the 3rd, which was a Tuesday. I finished Racine's Esther, which I have been reading at odd times. I do not think it possesses much merit besides elegance. There is neither character, passion, nor incident. Only compare it with the last drama I have read, Massinger's Duke of Milan. How powerful the latter, how tame the former. April 9th, Monday. I finished Britannicus, and for that school of dramatic writing, which it is not fair to compare with the English, I pronounce it a beautiful play. Some passages in it, especially that between Nero and Barras, Act 4, Scene 3, I admire very much. But the French and English drama are so totally different, and I so infinitely prefer the latter, that I am hardly a competent judge of Racine. His elegance, his harmonious versification, etc. are merits, but they are not the kind of merit for which I have been accustomed to look. A reader of Shakespeare and Massinger, who admires their painting of character, their knowledge of human nature, and their unstudied eloquence, their copiousness of incidents, and who is familiar with their wildness, irregularities, rough diction, and disregard of rhythm, is not likely to be much enchanted with a writer who is exactly the reverse of this, and whose beauties are quite of the opposite kind. Having finished this, I took a rather different kind of book with me into the garden, the Penny Cyclopedia, and sat reading it under the laurel hedge. I fixed on the article France and read the portions entitled Its History and The State of France Before the Revolution, which last interested me very much. I had not before a distinct idea of the enormous oppressions and grievances of which the French had reason to complain. The hawthorns are beginning to show their leaves. The park is in some parts carpeted with wood anemones, primroses, and ivy-leaved ranunculus. The forest filled with butterflies. Bats fly in the twilight. The gnats buzz at night. The woodpecker laughs loud and long. Swallows are beginning to appear. Welcome, welcome, these signs of coming spring. I only wish now to hear the sweet liquid notes of the willow wren and the clear, joyous, echoing cry of the little chiff-chaff. And when I look upward, instead of my glance being stopped by a thick leafy screen, I gaze at the deep blue sky through the embroidered veil of the delicate tracery of naked sprays, which still reminds me that we have just escaped from winter. I have been for some days so busy with the needle that I have not had time to devote myself to study. However, I have managed to read in the Cyclopedia today the lives of the great Elector of Brandenburg and all the kings of Prussia up to the present one. I look over again the history of Este, and to continue the life of Napoleon. Being very fatigued with my walk, I was obliged to lie down, and while on my bed I read, or rather skimmed, the reigns of Louis XIII, Louis XIV, and Louis V. 15th rather, in Eyre Evan Crow's History of France, for the sake of getting a good general view of those times. I also continued exercising myself in dates and learning new ones. April 12th, Thursday. Mackworth, and there's a note here that Mackworth is a boy of 12 years old, finished reading with me the first volume of the Siècle de Louis XIV. It is an interesting history and written in an easy, sprightly style. And then we have an editor's note in brackets here. On April 14th, she went with a younger sister to Worthing to pay a long-looked-for visit to her beloved friends, the Warrens. Here she stayed till May 17th, then paid a 5 days visit at Bevis Mount near Southampton. And so she picks up with her entries again in Worthing on April the 15th, which was Easter Sunday. So I guess that would be her first full day in Worthing. She did not write on her travel day. The weather prevented my going to church, and I had some long, delightful conversations with Mary. She is truly an enchanting being and converses most beautifully. It is a privilege to hear her and to watch her changing, lovely countenance, full of the expressions of intellect and goodness, is quite an engrossing pleasure. On whatever she talks well. Her grace of manner, felicity of language, and extreme softness add a charm to the originality of her thoughts and the beauty of her ideas and feelings. But especially the one thing needful is the great engrossing business of her life, the steady and delight of her mind. Oh, I wish I had a little time only to mention the subjects on which we talked, and then all her valuable observations would remain fixed in my mind. But, as it is, I am sure I shall forget very few. April 16th, Monday. And now at last I have seen the 3 cousins. We had expected them to dinner today, and were anxiously awaiting their arrival. Mary had told us how excessively shy they were, how frightened and silent they would be, and we had no end of fun and merriment beforehand. Mary said she would put 3 chairs for them in a row, and would ask them how long they meant to be shy. For that I would minute them, and speak to them at the end of that time. That's an interesting phrase. I would minute them? I'm not sure what that means. But anyway, she's going to speak to them at the end of that time. At last they came. We rushed laughing to the window and watched the carriageful pouring into the house. We shook hands with them, and they all walked silently to the window in dreadful confusion, turning their backs upon everybody else. I stood amazed and bewildered, Mary laughing heartily. We made an attempt to unbend them by taking them to our room to prepare for dinner. It was all in vain. We could hardly extract a sentence from them. The face of affairs improved, however, by and by, thanks to Mary, who is the life and soul of everything. It is very ludicrous for these girls to be afraid of us, for we are but pygmies compared with them. They are great tall girls whom I am frightened to look at. So evidently some very shy cousins, perhaps very socially anxious cousins. It does make you wonder what kind of home life they had if they, don't speak when they visit someone as close to them as their cousin. April the 21st, Saturday. I shall always have the image in my mind of the happy, smiling circle round the table or the fire. I shall still seem to hold dear Mary's hand in mine, to watch the play of her speaking features, to hear her sweet and changing tones. I shall remember her cap with its long lace strings in the morning, and a black ringlet straying over each cheek, and her crimson shawl and gauze handkerchief, and in the evening her beautifully formed head, undisguised by a cap, and adorned with the long clustering curls which once grew there, her white throat, and the ample folds of her many-coloured Grecian scarf. These are pictures I shall always see. May 5th, Saturday. Oh, it was delicious. It was the first evening walk I have had for 7 or 8 months, and it seemed to me like paradise. There was just breeze enough to temper the heat of the descending sun. The sky was cloudless, the birds singing joyously, the air scented with wallflowers and primroses. The shrubs were tinted with the fresh green foliage of May. And oh, the soft, cool green turf. I ran about it as if I was still a child. I stooped down and pressed it in my hand. I quite loved it, for it reminded me of spring and Woodbury. I rushed about hither and thither, unable to control my delight. I took off my bonnet and stood still to let the air blow through my hair and cool my face. I almost felt as if I were once more in the enjoyment of health and strength in the woods and meadows of my own dear Woodbury. Mary, too, could not resist the temptation of sitting down on the shady grass. I think she was as happy as I was. And we've got quite a long entry coming up, so we will leave it there for today at the beginning of May 1838. And it's quite sad how much she longs for Woodbury, her home of her teenage years.